Welcome to the Triple S podcast where we discuss the standings, the statistics, and the scoreboard. Today we predict the college football playoffs and discuss the teams left out as the games rapidly approach. The field is already set with number 1 Georgia, number 2 Michigan, number 3 TCU, and number 4 Ohio State filling out the lineup. I think it was the right selection. There wasn't really any other team that I think could have made it. There was some discussion about Alabama, about Utah maybe, but both of those teams had multiple losses. And frankly, Alabama lost to inferior opponents, and Utah had some ugly losses on their resume. So I think that those are both teams that, didn't really deserve to go in, especially compared to the 4 teams that did make it, which I think are all very deserving. Georgia and Michigan are undefeated. TCU only lost once in their conference championship game. And Ohio State lost only to another playoff team in Michigan. And, I think both semifinals are going to be really even. I'm going to start with the Peach Bowl, Georgia versus Ohio State. Last year, Georgia, the name of the game was their defense. But this year, their offense has really shown up there with Stetson Bennett, a Heisman finalist this year. And they're evenly matched with Ohio State, which is historically an offensive juggernaut per yards per game. And we've seen Ohio State fold under pressure against Michigan. That defense, even though they brought in Jim Knowles and they brought in some really good recruits, they're still sort of lacking on that defensive side, especially compared to the offense. And we saw them fold under pressure against Michigan. And Georgia is a team with so many options. They seem to have so many different guys that they can go to. Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, that giant 6'7" tight end, Washington, and Stetson can throw it all around the field. And so I think if Georgia gets off to a fast start, and if they win the possession battle, which they have been doing, Stetson Bennett's a real smart quarterback. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I think the game should be theirs. My official prediction is Georgia 48, Ohio State 31. I think Ohio State won't be able to catch up, and I think Georgia's going to the national championship. I think that the other semifinal, the Fiesta Bowl out there in Arizona, is going to be as interesting. It's Michigan versus TCU. Michigan undefeated all season. However, they did play some inferior competition out of conference. And TCU has been really the surprise of this year. They did lose in the conference championship game, but only because of a 2-point conversion fail in overtime. So I don't even think that should count against them. Nor do I think that they didn't really do anything wrong in that game, and I don't think there's anything super concerning out there in what happened in Dallas that should carry over to the Fiesta Bowl. I do think that this could become a battle between the QBs, J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, and Max Duggan at TCU. Max Duggan was a Heisman finalist, and I think he'll really have to carry this team. But, I think the ace that Michigan has is Blake Corum. He's back and healthy, and I think it's going to be too much for a team that frankly, TCU struggled with Deuce Vaughn out there in Kansas. Kansas State tore him up on the ground, and Blake Corum's going to do that, but even more. I think it will be a close game, but I think that, Michigan having Blake Corum is going to be a deciding factor. I'm going to say Michigan 38, TCU 31. And that brings us to my top 10. Before we get to the semifinals, the regular season's over, the conference championships are over, and this is a definitive top 10 list in college football. Number 1, obviously, undefeated Georgia. Number 2, obviously, undefeated Michigan. Number 3, I have TCU. Number 4, I have Ohio State. I agree with the playoff committee here. I think that's the right decision. However, at number 5, I have Tennessee. I was debating between Tennessee and Alabama, but Tennessee has an outright win against Alabama, and while they did lose to South Carolina, I don't think that should count against them. They absolutely beat up LSU. Even if it was a close win against Alabama, they played really good against Alabama. They've been dominant all year, and I think that puts them ahead of Alabama, who, yes, both of their losses were to good teams, really close at the end of games. However, they do have 2 losses, and I don't think I think for Alabama fans, maybe being number 6 is a slight, but that's that's really good. They didn't reach all of their potential, but they still played amazing. And those two losses did hurt them, but I don't think that that's too terrible. Number 7, Clemson. Number 8, Kansas State, who was really a sleeper to begin the season and was a sleeper throughout the season, and really popped on the national spotlight last week when they beat TCU. Number 9, Utah, who I put ahead of USC. USC I have at number 10 because of that outright win. In the regular season, USC beat Utah by 1 point, but even if Caleb Williams was hurt, I think that Utah just showed that they were the better team out there in Las Vegas in the conference championship game, the Pac-12 conference championship game, and that's why I have them at number 9 and USC at number 10 to round out the top 10. There's some prizes this year. Who would have thought that TCU would have been number 3? They were in bottom of the league odds-wise to win the Big 12. Nobody thought that USC would get that turnaround against Lincoln Riley. Caleb Williams is, a Heisman winner. I didn't expect it to begin the season. I didn't expect Jordan Addison to make that much of a move. And all these transfers they pulled in, I think that really shows where we're at in college football nowadays, where you can just bring in a transfer team and make them really good. Kansas State was a popular sleeper team to begin the season, but they weren't expected to be anything crazy. And obviously at number 5, Tennessee's been a program that's really struggled these last 10 to 20 years, and they finally put it all together with Hendon Hooker, and I'm excited to see what they do next year. And they finally got over that hump of beating Alabama. There were some disappointments late in the season, but I think that especially these 3 teams, USC, TCU, and Tennessee, have a really bright future ahead of them. And while they weren't, top contenders to begin the season, they will be next year, along with the usual crowd. And I'm very excited to watch the playoffs and national championship, and I will be talking about that soon, as well as everything else that's going on in the NBA and in the winter meetings in Major League Baseball. But for now, that's it for me. Thank you for listening.